Basically, you had a blindfold and a shotgun, and you're having the time of your life.
Exactly. The Doom music starts playing.
That's not good.
Yo, I'm gonna steal my dad's baby. I know where that shit.
Okay, so everyone thinks that the lizard men who control us live in the moon, but I know they actually live in Ontario.
I'm totally a part of that.
I kind of see it in your eyes. They never quite look for. Oh, hey, we're recording. Hello, everyone. Hello, campers. My name is Ben Lasser, and this is On the Roll, where we talk with fellow D&D players about their favorite in-campaign moments. Now, D&D has a lot of monsters, and we all know the ultimate monster no one will ever be able to defeat is the DM. And I seem to have my DM with me today, Zach Vayo. How you doing today?
Not too bad. How about yourself?
Oh, I'm doing okay. I'm dressed like your uncle on vacation, so that's fun. Now, you all might know Zach for DM for Nat Camp, but before we started Nat Camp, we were in a different campaign that was partially in New Jersey, partially in the Witcher universe, and today we're talking about the day he decided to throw a beholder at us and see what happened.
Yeah, no, it's definitely a decision that I had thought about for a good amount of time, and it was the first time I'd ever used that monster, and so I was a little hesitant, but I mean, I feel like it ended up really well. I mean, everybody, is still kind of talking about that situation today. So I feel like it landed pretty well.
Okay, before we get into the nitty gritty, for those who might not know D&D as well as some other folks, what is a beholder?
So a beholder is a monster in D&D that it's kind of like a floating eyeball with a bunch of other tentacles with eyeballs on them. They're magical beings, kind of the staple of Dungeons and Dragons on most monster manuals. So it's hard to not know once you start kind of looking into it. But they are definitely a challenging, kind of feat for any adventuring party, especially given specific circumstances in game and stuff. So they're fun to play, I'll tell you that.
Yeah, they can nullify magic, they can freeze people, they got first beams, they got you die now beams. So with all that, I want to know, what made you decide to throw one at us, you monster?
Yeah, so I mean, the group party was the party is pretty big. I mean, there's like 7 players. I have a hard time just with my brain kind of all over the place, trying to keep track of so many different things. I have a hard time having a multitude of enemies. So I try my best to try and find kind of like one singular or 2, 3 tops enemies to be able to, put up a fight against a group of 7. So the Beholder was kind of perfect where it has a handful of legendary actions every round. And then it also, what it can do with just targeting just about anybody within general sight, it worked out really well. And then, as you just mentioned, it does have a nullify magic effect if the main big eyeball is staring at a person. And there's a couple of casters in the party, so I figured that would be a really good kind of challenge. Not just throwing a fireball for fireball's sake.
Well, first of all, for fireball's sake, it's the perfect reason to do anything. But more importantly, can you give the briefest context about where the party was and what they were doing when this beholder came to attack us?
What you guys were doing, you were trying to find all of these kind of phylacteries. So at this point, we're well into the world of The Witcher. You're trying to find the handful of phylacteries that kind of are harnessing a bunch of power, essentially. And so that kind of brought you to where you were in the worlds to find the first one. And so it again, I wanted it to be challenging and everything like that, and it really had to be a good, legitimate boss battle for you guys for something so key.
We just went through this giant dungeon. My character, Jonathan Helsing, killed a giant crab. Our halfling rogue, Bijou, who was in the first episode, defiled a mimic. I'll let you decide what that means without context. Finally, after we solved this puzzle, this beholder came to attack us. How did you expect things to happen?
It kind of what you guys did is what I was expecting. I knew for a fact it was going to be a bit of a drawn out fight, which it took almost the entire session. I'm pretty sure, if I remember correctly. There was some stuff definitely during the fight that happened that I was not expecting. Like I know, I'm sure we'll talk about this a little bit more, but this was the closest I've ever gotten to killing a character. And at this point, it was a character was actually sacrificing themselves for another party member. That was crazy. And the spells that this beholder has, I mean, it's like disintegrate and like stuff like that. So I'm rolling copious amounts of dice for damage, and it was always so scary. I want it to be a challenge, but I also don't want to just like party wipe or anything. And so, it was just like, all right, like the death ray hits and here's like a bunch of D8s just throwing your way. You were actually able to crit on the big eye, which in that sense, I ended up removing the nullify magic effect. It was a really cool, really creative experience, for you guys and for myself as well. So
let's zoom in and get some of those nitty-gritty details. So the beholder attacks. We opened up with that just whipping our asses. Like I was frozen for a bit. Eventually, he tried to do, I believe, the disintegrate way against Bijou. And why don't you tell us what happened after that?
He was pretty low health at this point, and I was trying my best. I mean, I didn't really want to, pick any favorites as far as the enemy in terms of who was shooting. So I was honestly just rolling for everybody. I had them all in a line, and then I rolled to see who essentially it would like randomly target. Ended up targeting Bijou, and then Tyler, another character in the game. He expressed. Yeah, he was our barbarian. He expressed, some level of desire of, wanting to kind of go out in a little bit of a blaze of glory or, in a heroic manner if he were to die. Was chatting with him a little bit before the session and during the session while things were kind of breaking down. And, as soon as I was like, all right, Bijou, like this hits essentially. And I started rolling the dice, and he ended up opting to jump in the way of the beam, and he rolled high enough. I honestly I gave it to him. Like he rolled high, and I was like, I'm not even going to do like traditionally you'd probably do like half damage or just like an assisted roll or something like that, but just for story purposes and stuff like that, I was like, all right, you just take the brunt of the whole thing. And he was downed like pretty hard.
Yeah.
It was if I remember correctly, it was pretty close to just totally wiping him permanently, without giving the opportunity to resuscitate or do the death saves and stuff like that. So which was just a crazy experience. I mean, I was nervous and kind of shaking and like wondering like what decision best to make. Do I try and like finish him off? Like would the enemy do that, or would the enemy just try and focus on like the rest of the party, or like what the deal is? So yeah, it was a pretty big moment in the campaign as for me as well, as like a DM. So
as soon as like Tyler hit 0, what was the first thought in your head?
In my mind, I was like, I need to be able to describe this in the most thematically pleasing way possible, so that a moment like this isn't kind of squandered. Like this was key. Like none of you guys had been downed. I mean, a lot of you had gotten very close, but none of you guys had been downed. Death wasn't necessarily kind of on the table for the campaign up till that point. It was a very new experience for everybody. And so in my mind, I was like, okay, like we've kind of talked about his character potentially not being around anymore. So like that's, I've come to grips with that. But then I was like, I need to make this as, as satisfying and if it is the end, as possible. And yeah, I really leaned into my creative writing processes as I was describing this, character essentially hugging another character, taking the bullet, for lack of a better term, or taking the beam, I should say, and then kind of collapsing and near dying, like on top of this other character.
What was some other of your favorite strategies or moves the party did to try to beat this beholder?
Yeah, so actually Bijou, the one who got saved, ended up jumping onto the beholder. So he's a halfling, so he was small enough. Yeah, I mean it was jumping on the beholder. A lot of people were targeting specific eyes. Each eye kind of is a different spell essentially that it can just kind of cast at random. I know your character was aiming for the big central eye, which then removed like the magic nullification, and then you guys were also able to dismember, I think, one or two other of the more dangerous eye tentacles to kind of save you from a couple of the spell options there, which was, I thought, was super creative as like a task, not necessarily, just trying to put out as big of a damage number as possible, but like trying to really finesse.
Was there a particular moment in all of this where you realized, oh, okay, no one's dying, they're okay, they've turned the tables?
Not really. There were a couple characters that kept their distance well enough and like had enough cover that they didn't really get hurt all that much. It was pretty nice to know that, there wasn't any point in the fight that leaned one way or the other exponentially. That was also very gratifying as the DM having made that decision and be like, all right, this has been a balanced fight the entire time. This is crazy.
Near the end of the fight, Beth, who's played by Danny, who plays Poppy in Nat Camp, she went down as well. What were you thinking around then?
I mean, I was a little worried. Honestly, I was more so surprised with the amount of damage that the beholder, because that one was like a bite. It wasn't any sort of spell that happened, but she's a wizard. So her health pool was way lower than everybody else's. And so it came as a surprise when she did get down. At that point, I believe Tyler had like kind of stabilized, somebody ended up going and helping him out. So I was like, all right, if they were able to do it, and I knew you guys had like some health potions and stuff like that. I was like, if they were able to do it for him, I got a pretty good feeling about Beth's character. I mean, there was still like a level of worry because you never know with death saving throws. You could, roll 2 1s and then you're screwed, So, but yeah, that one was a little less stressful than the first one that happened pretty early on in the fight.
How did we finally kill the giant floating testicle?
Yeah, I believe it was your character, if I remember correctly.
It was, but I want to hear you say it.
Yep. Yeah, no, your character had the final blow, which was awesome. It was actually kind of a theme. You're the fighter of the group, and so you definitely had like one of the higher damage outputs, and you were able to really just kind of put an end to it, which was awesome. I mean, you guys were all over that thing by the end of the fight. Like Bijou was on top of it. Beth's character was right up there, casting a whole bunch of spells, like just a whole bunch of craziness. It was awesome. And then your character kind of swooped in and gave it one good or a couple good stabs with your rapier.
Obviously, we've been talking a lot about the gameplay. It attacked us, we attacked back. Was there anything from like a storytelling or role-playing perspective that really intrigued you about this fight?
So you guys had kind of found the phylactery already. It was in kind of like the altar thing that was at the end of, on the top of this mountain at the end of the cave that you guys were going through. And so I thought it was really interesting. You didn't let the beholder get to the altar at all, which I thought was awesome. And I did have, some ideas as far as if it were to, because the phylactery, I mean, it was like this huge amount of power that it could use and harness, so I was like, all right, if it like is able to get there and break this altar essentially and get to the phylactery, it can use it. In my mind, I was kind of just like, it'll get like 2 extra powerful spells. But I thought it was really cool, like without even necessarily stating that it was like very interested in getting over to the altar, you guys really put yourselves in the way of it. So that, and I don't even know if you knew that the phylactery was in the altar. I'm pretty sure that it came out afterwards, after the fight. And so it was just kind of like a neat thing where it was like, all right, the beholder shows up behind you and you guys stood your ground very well, which was cool.
As much as I'd love to take credit for that, I had no fucking clue. I just was trying to stab it and not get a hit. That was the only thing in my mind right then.
I have a plan. Attack.
For sure, for sure. Yeah, no, I think that was a lot of people's mindset. But either way, it worked out, which was cool.
I imagine, I mean, granted, I've never been on your side of the DM screen before, but I imagine a Beholder is tough to DM. It's got 1,000 different powers. How do you DM a Beholder?
Yeah, so I mean, luckily with monsters that are straight from the Dungeon Masters, not the Dungeon Masters, the Monster Manual, there's a lot of stuff broken down for you already. So if you are a new DM, stick to what's tried and true, because that's like kind of the safest path. But like I mentioned before, I mean, I was putting so many things up to chance by rolling the dice, like who it was targeting and stuff like that. Yeah, no, luckily it was like a very cool randomized thing. The only thing that really wasn't was the magic nullification gaze. And that was pretty easy because I told myself in my brain, and I was like, it can most likely something that powerful can tell who's magical and who's not. So it was really easy to just kind of be like, all right, it's looking at Beth, who's a wizard. It's looking at Bill, who is also a wizard, or Zook, who's like a bard of the group and stuff like that. So it was pretty easy with that to kind of just make that decision right from the get-go. But that was probably one of the stronger decisions I even ended up having to make. So
basically, you had a blindfold and a shotgun, and you're having the time of your life.
Exactly. The Doom music starts playing.
That's Chris. That's I think.
Yo, I'm gonna seal my dad's fate. I know where that shit.
So what did this whole experience teach you as a DM?
It taught me that, I mean, you guys can take a lot more than expected. So, I mean, I from there, I was kind of like, all right, all of my encounters have been way too easy. I definitely could have been harder on you guys with some of the other fights. Not all of them. There was a John Wayne fight that but that's a story for another time.
Yes.
That was probably the biggest takeaway, was like, okay, I can really start throwing some big things at you without worrying too much about if you can handle it or not, because like you totally can. Having downed essentially my first player character, almost killed them. I wasn't necessarily so nervous about that anymore, because I mean, from the get-go, it's a nerve-wracking thing. It's like, these characters we've been playing for like a year, kind of started with lockdown and has just, I mean, it's kind of dropped off like a little bit just from Nat Camp and some of the other projects that everybody's been working on. But I mean, we played for just about a year consecutively, and everybody has kept their characters aside from one, so
that dick.
Yeah. So, everybody, to my knowledge, they're all very tied to their characters, and they want the best for them, and they don't want them to die. But it seemed like the response from having a character get downed and almost die, it seemed to almost just reinvigorate everybody's desire to fight harder and harder things. It was just like, okay, like that's like a real part of this kind of gritty world here. And so that's something that we definitely need to keep in mind moving forward. And that also, kind of helps with throwing harder and harder things. It's now you guys are pretty prepared for not good things to happen to your character, much like your character a little later on.
Yeah, that's a story for a different day.
Yeah, it's another one. It's a whole bunch of stories.
You learn that you can throw harder things at us. Now in that camp, we threw a dragon at us at level 3.
It was a baby one. It was a young black one, and honestly, it acted more like a puppy than a dragon. So,
I know, I'm just getting crap. So, do you have any advice for dungeon masters?
A lot of people will say, just kind of you kind of just have to feel it out with what your party is capable of, because obviously, people who are new to the game aren't going to be as effective at taking stuff down that they theoretically, would be able to at the level that they're at. Like if you're forgetting to roll at advantage, if you're forgetting to add like your bardic inspiration, if you're forgetting kind of some of these things, it can make your life a lot harder. I mean, my suggestion is to start small. You don't want to just TPK right from the get-go. If you are totally new to it, I recommend starting with very easy enemies, but just adding numbers. I mean, it's a little hard to keep track of, but adding more numbers makes the difficulty increase a surprising amount. Rather than just having like a singular, slightly tougher enemy. Once you kind of get into the swing of things and you're pretty comfortable with your party, maybe actually keeping up with the like the CR values of monsters, which is the challenge rating, which is, I don't know exactly how it's calculated. I'm not gonna lie. I don't know how that's calculated. But
there's Monkey's a typewriter in the back of Wizards of the Coast.
Exactly. Other than that, there are resources out there. I utilize Kobold Fight Club. It's a awesome resource that it can randomly generate encounters based on the number of players and what level they're at. And you can also kind of plug your own stuff in that's obviously D&D canon monster manual stuff, and it'll tell you how difficult it would be given your party theoretically, obviously, which is why I would start by mentioning like start maybe a little easy, like a goblin here and there, and then be like, okay, if the first 2 goblins were super, they just walked right over them, the rest of the goblins in the cave herd, now 5 more show up. Let's see how they handle more numbers, even though it's like an easier task. Definitely ease yourself into it. I wouldn't start by throwing a beholder at anybody. So
okay, so anything else about the beholder fight or previous campaign or Nat Camp campaign or anything else in the world that you want to mention before we wrap up here?
I will say, as far as a DMing perspective, for those of you who are new to it, start with what's already written. Kind of nabbing content that other DMs are putting out there is never an issue. Stealing content is a-okay in just about everybody's book who's posting their content. But other than that, I would say, go check out Nat Camp. It's a whole bunch of fun. We've all been playing together for over a year now. And with these new characters in a new setting, I'm very excited to kind of see how things pan out, especially with the dragon that you guys encountered.
Hey, thank you very much. If you want to see more Zach and more importantly more of me, because come on, who doesn't love me? Other than me, of course. Please follow up. We're everywhere you can find podcasts. We're on YouTube. We are on Stitcher. We are on Spotify. We are not on Apple Podcast.
You're wrong.
Because we are cursed by Tim Cook. Though everywhere else where podcasts are. So please continue watching for Real Play D&D for fun interviews like this. I hope to see you all around the campfire. Goodbye.